Hi, I'm John Tripp, Minister of Propaganda for Darwino Incorporated. This video is going to talk about some of the building blocks that are necessary to build a Darwino application using the example of our simple Domino discussion database that is in the video for which the link is popping up on the screen now. What we're going to do in this video is talk about, first, what does Darwino do? Darwino is a full-stack enterprise development platform, and it's really focused its sweet spot on building mobile and social applications with, importantly, strong offline capabilities. So Darwino DB allows for seamless replication so that users can work with local data and have it replicated to an enterprise system from multiple different enterprise systems. This example that we're going to talk about in this video is a standard IBM Notes discussion database. We made no changes to the database. It's going to replicate its data with Darwino DB on the Darwino application server. And then users are going to use Darwino applications to read data from and create data in the Darwino database, the Darwino DB. And then Darwino DB will replicate changes on the fly with the IBM Notes database. So here's what the building blocks are to make this all work. First, on the Domino server, we have the actual Domino application, discussion.nsf, and we build a Darwino data access servlet and deploy it on the Domino server. We'll look at that in a second. Then on our application server, we have the Darwino DB instance, and that will replicate with the Domino server for the Darwino data access servlet. And users will have access to that application from a web browser from this server. And of course, then we have the mobile device, which has the replication of the data from the Darwino DB on the application server down to the mobile device, and that's selective replication, so you don't have to bring down the entire database. And the user will be able to use that application, that native application on the mobile device, and update data, change data, read new data, make any sort of changes that are required, and it'll replicate back through to the application server and then to the Domino server. So let's take a look at the first step of the demo, which is creating the custom data access servlet. This is an Eclipse development environment with Darwino Studio extensions. On the left, there's a number of projects listed, and first you see the Darwino data access components that were automatically added by Darwino Studio when the developer chose to do a Domino synchronization project. These are the OSGI plugins that you have to use to synchronize a Darwino DB instance with a Domino database. Now, once this structure is set up, you need to create a custom plugin, which becomes our data access servlet that's going to run on the Domino server. This plugin contains all of the access and translation code that you write that is unique to your environment. In this plugin, you can map fields, do data transformations, run other programmatic updates, or any other step that's necessary to make the data usable for your Darwino application. Once you write your plugin, you need to expose the plugin as an OSGI servlet. Here, we expose the discussion database through the /Darwino sync URL. This URL is the endpoint that Darwino will use to replicate the data, and that's all we need to do on the Domino server side to make our application work. Okay, now going back to our demo steps, the next thing that we're going to look at is exposing the data access servlet on the Darwino application server side. This is relatively straightforward. Let's take a look at it now. We're now looking at a different Darwino development project, and here we're going to configure Darwino to consume the data access servlet that we just created. We do this in the web.xml file, and there's parameters to set that define whether the endpoint is enabled for replication, what the path to the service is, what kind of replication is desired, in this case it's pull and push, and which listener class is mapped to the service. Now this is all that's required to enable the replication between Domino and this Darwino DB instance. So now we've looked at how to create the data access servlet and how to expose the data access servlet on the Darwino application server which actually will enable the data replication from Domino to Darwino. Next, we're going to turn to actually building the Darwino application itself. A Darwino application consists of several projects. First, every Darwino application has a shared project in which all of the common components of the application are stored. Then we also have to create an additional project for each platform on which we intend to deploy the application. In these projects, the unique code that's required for each of these platforms is stored, but they all, of course, include the shared project. Let's take a look at an example. The core business logic of this application resides in the shared project. This business logic will be incorporated into and be executed on all of the deployed platforms, in our case, the web and Android. Let's look at one class. In this example, one component of the shared logic is data access and mapping code. This code that we're looking at accesses the Darwino DB and on the query save document event maps the data from the application into the JSON object in the Darwino DB. This code is consistent across all platforms, so it needs to be written only once in the shared project. Also in the shared project are the core UI and business logic components of the application. These core components are simply an AngularJS application with two files. First is the index.html, which contains the UI for the application, and the second file is the business logic JavaScript file. Note that these files are completely portable across all devices. In the JavaScript file, we instantiate a session which allows us to connect directly to the Darwino DB instance. Because of this, we can call data access methods directly from the JS file. We can also call the Darwino REST API directly and have AngularJS consume the results. At this point, we're almost done. We only have to create some basic shell files for the J2EE and Android applications, and these will be generated by Darwino Studio. First, for the J2EE application, we have to build the listener class, which is the actual class that replicates with Domino. You'll remember that we had to include that in the web.xml in step 2. We also have to create a simple application file that defines the application and the services it requires. That's it. Finally, we use a standard Android project in Eclipse to instantiate the Android application. We create an application which is similar to the one in the J2EE app, and then an activity. The activity is simply a window on Android that displays the AngularJS application hosted on the Darwino server. This short demo has only showed a very small part of what you can do with the Darwino platform. Get more information at www.darwino.com.